Welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab. Today we're going to taste and talk about an Ethiopian wash coffee that we roasted earlier in the week. I've got a couple family members joining me, so stick around. Thanks for joining me today. I invited a couple of my family members to experience an Ethiopian wash coffee that I roasted earlier in the week. And we started to talk about what the coffee tastes like and some of the notes that we experienced. But that conversation led to, how do we know how to describe what we're tasting? What if we're not tasting any of the tasting notes that are on the bag? How are we supposed to know what to look for in the different flavors? Maybe you're even experiencing problems where you're tasting coffees and there's supposed to be these certain notes in the coffee, but you're not getting that. And so we talk about that in this video, and then what it leads to, we talk about how maybe the roasting may have influenced that, or even the brewing may have influenced that, but ultimately we end up landing on our grinder. We talk about our grinders and how what we're doing with our grinders can influence our coffee. And then we end up wrapping up talking about just the overall experience that a home roaster has to deal with and how they can up their game in brewing coffee. So I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you appreciate the conversation between myself and a couple family members. One more thing before we get started, I want to thank you guys. There's so many of you that have been subscribing. That's awesome. If you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, I would encourage you to do that. Every week we put out a new video and it's relevant to home coffee roasting. And if you really like what you saw, I'd encourage you to hit the like button. Also, if you would, hit that notification bell so when I upload new videos, you'll be notified. So thanks again for joining me, and let's get to the tasting. Okay, so what do you guys smell? I smell a slightly sweet syrupy smell.
Yeah, and maybe like a syrup or like a jam or something in there. Yeah.
A jam?
Yeah, well, syrupy jam.
That's pretty good.
I get like grape juice and almond skin.
Man. Okay, I would never get grape juice and almond skin. I'm not saying that's not there, but
There's like a nutty side to it.
Yeah.
There's like some sort of savory smell in there that I'm calling almond skin, but predominantly it's the fruity, juicy grape juice.
Okay. All right. Let's go for the taste.
Yeah, so I didn't really smell, the grape juice, but I think I definitely taste the grape juice. It's like just the feel of it. It feels like drinking like Welch's or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if I'm not sure it's grape, but I'm getting I'm getting kind of a wine, like a white wine,
Okay.
kind of a sensation on the back sides of my tongue. What do you think about the complexity of this coffee?
There's some complexity. For me, complexity is the presence of, well, let's see if I can define this on the fly. It's the presence of a diverse set of flavors and sensations that, in my experience of tasting something, I kind of get like, I taste one and I get pulled to it, but then I come back and I'm pulled to this other one, and I'm bouncing back and forth between these sensations, and that's what makes it complex.
Yeah.
The opposite of that would be if you taste something and it has, I don't know, maybe one main flavor component, maybe two, and every time you just think, well, yeah, those are there. But the complexity is more this experience of going back and forth between them as they interplay. So there's some balance involved.
I had a guy that was asking me online. He says, I'm roasting these coffees and I can't tell the difference between one or another. Why? And so I thought to myself, well, either he can't taste, he doesn't really have the ability to be able to differentiate, or there's something going on within his roast. And I think what we discovered was that he was roasting the coffee too quickly. It wasn't roasting all the way through the bean. And so he had under roasted coffee, and he would grind it. And, when there would hardly be any extraction, because it's just the outer part of the bean was roasted, not the inner part. So when it comes to tasting coffees, if people are wondering, how come I can't taste this, or how come I'm not able to smell this, it could be, your own ability to be able to sense the difference within your taste buds, but it more likely could be the way that the coffee was roasted.
The interesting thing about coffee, I'm sure there's other products that are like this, but with coffee, it's very obvious that there's a chain of quality that goes back to the way that the farming is done agriculturally, sure. Like how the trees are treated and what trees they are and where they grow.
Yep.
And then after the fruit is picked, how it's processed, and then how it's roasted, as you said, that can really affect the cup, whether or not you're getting like a barbecue type of drink or you're getting a fruity and delicate type of drink that is strongly affected by the roast. But it can be the best roast that has ever happened in the history of mankind. But if your brewing isn't right, then that's a problem too. So it's a chain of quality, and every stage needs to serve to present the coffee in the way that you're hoping to see it.
Yeah. So many different hands can ruin that coffee, from the farmer who is, taking care of the tree or growing the fruit, through the processing of the coffee, the fermentation process, through the shipment of the coffee, how it was stored, packaged, and where it sat, the humidity and all of that, all the way through to when it finally gets to our homes, because we're home roasters, and what we do with it. And we can completely ruin it. And even if we get the roast right, we can completely ruin it with our cheap and chintzy brewing methods or brewing devices or all of that. So I guess Michael you guys don't realize what he's just done, but he's opened up the door to present a fairly controversial topic in our family, because he ultimately is trying to sell me his used grinder.
I may or may not be trying to sell you my used grinder for a mere 20% above market price of a new one.
It's a total ripoff.
What?
So that I can upgrade. But I don't think that's happening. But that's really not why I brought that up. I mean, someone who's new at home roasting, and they're new to the degree where the beans are green on the inside and brown on the outside, they probably have some learning to do with their brewing as well. And that's where I was going with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I kind of pushed the door open. You cracked it open. I kind of pushed it open. One of the things that happened, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, Michael and I, we were doing a tasting, and he had tasted the coffee and brewed it at his home before we had actually met. And then when he came over and I brewed the coffee, it tastes differently. So we have the exact same roast, but we have a different grinder and a slightly different brew method. So I was using a Kalita, and he's got this December dripper, which is kind of like a Kalita, but you can adjust the rate of the flow, right? So let's just say that is, let's say we exclude the brew method. It comes down to the grinder. And that's what we're talking about here is the grinder. So what I wanted to do was well, first, this is the coffee. Oops, this is the coffee that we're drinking right now. That's the roast that we did of the Ethiopian washed. And we had a great roast profile. We had less than 50% during our dry time. We had about a 37% middle phase, a total of 3 minutes and 46 seconds. And then we had about a minute and what was it? We had a minute and a half of development, which got us to about 15% development, maybe 16% development. So it was definitely within the specs of our roast profile. It went pretty well. This is the grind size of the beans. Now, Michael, you're being blocked. So, because the picture is right in the middle of the screen, but you're able to see this image. Are you able to comment on the grind size? Because I'm grinding a medium fine. I have a Bodum grinder, and it's a medium fine setting.
Yeah. So what I noticed.
That's not medium. That's more medium fine.
So I'm going to combine this picture, but also with my experience with your grinder. And what I noticed was that despite the setting that you had your grinder on, there was a fair amount of variation. So maybe if the majority of it, when you stick your finger in and rub it together, you get a powdery type of thing that seems medium fine, but there were also big chunks. And if you see that kind of variance, then there's also probably very small pieces that are much smaller than the medium fine that you're going for. And I think what happened when I was over that one time was you were also experimenting with higher water temperature.
Higher temperatures, yeah. Based on something I saw online, actually.
Yeah, there was a study published by the SCAA saying that water temperature, when everything else is isolated, water temperature doesn't affect final brew strength or sensory experience. To be honest, I don't fully understand that report because in all the experiments I've done, increasing the water temperature increases the extraction. Mm-hmm. So what was happening is you were applying hotter water to ground up coffee that had a wide particle size distribution. And so those smaller pieces were getting over extracted and creating a bitter taste.
Yeah.
And there was some under extraction too because of the big chunks. So yeah, what you want is a grinder that is very consistent. Mm-hmm. That instead of a lot of small pieces, a lot of big pieces, they're all about the same size. Mm-hmm. And then that will allow you to be more accurate with your brewing as you adjust water temperature and turbulence and other things.
Jeremy, what kind of grinder do you have?
I have the Baratza Encore grinder.
Okay. And Michael, what is the grinder you're trying to sell me?
It's the Baratza Virtuoso Precisio.
Like okay. So is that different, much different than the Encore?
Yeah, it was an upgrade. When I went from, because I had a couple Encores, or they used to be called something else before the Encore. Mm-hmm. I had a couple of those, and then when I upgraded to this one, there was a noticeable improvement in cup quality.
You notice the difference?
Oh, yeah.
So, okay, the one thing I did not, because we have one. I've got an Encore or whatever, Baratza, whatever, and it's older, and it would take 3 times as long to grind the coffee. And it created a lot of static. And I know there's tricks to reduce the static electricity. You can throw a few drops of water in with the whole bean and mix it up. Or use a sprayer. There's the one pump sprayer option that some people are doing. But it just took forever. And that was one of the reasons why we kind of left that. And it was loud. It was loud, and it's just like in the morning when that thing drones. It's bad.
Well, I was saying that there was a noticeable improvement going from the Encore to the one that I have, the Precisio.
Yeah.
But I do think that the Encore, in my experience with Jeremy's, which is a more recent model than the ones that I had, I think that his is probably being a little bit more consistent than your Bodum grinder is.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Yeah. All right. Jeremy, any comments on the grind size? What size are you using for your grind?
Yeah, so the grind setting I use is 14 on the on the Encore, and it gets like also like a medium fine type grind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was doing I guess a more like a coarser grind, like like a year or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
And once I found that one article that described like the George Howe method, and he used basically like the same grinders I used. And he used 14. So I definitely noticed a big improvement, when I went finer. And I think my philosophy, for grinding coffee, is no matter what. Well, first you have to figure out what kind of filtration method you're using. Are you using like a Kalita filter, or are you using like a French press filter? Like one of those mesh filters.
Yeah.
And basically, you should probably try to find like a happy medium where it's like as fine as you can go, for whatever filter you're using.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't affect so you still get the coffee filter through within a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
And not too many grounds in the coffee. But the finer you go, usually the better the outcome is at the end.
So the finer you go, the slower the brew rate could be. I mean, if you grind so fine, it may take significantly longer for your coffee to flow through the grounds. So there's a fine line of going too fine or not fine enough. So you want the finer grind fine enough so that you're going to get as much extraction as possible with water, of course, that's not too hot. And so we'll talk about temperature in a second, but not so fine that it turns into a mud pie.
Yeah.
That's why you can, if you look online, someone like Scott Rao, who's posting a lot of experiments and his methods on Instagram, he has a lot of his equipment is more expensive, especially his grinder. He'll have brew times of 5 to 8 minutes, and he'll end up with a much higher extraction yield than we have, but it doesn't taste over extracted and bitter because his grinder is more consistent and he's dealing with way less fines.
Yeah.
So it's something to keep in mind. Your brewing method is affected by the limitations of your equipment.
Yeah.
And equipment that's super consistent in grind is really expensive. So to some extent, everyone's dealing with that.
Yeah. So for the home roaster, for somebody that wants to up their game, the Bodum that I have, I think it's like $100, maybe $129. I haven't looked, but you're going to pay probably closer to $200 or more for the Brazza. What's the Brazza running now?
I'll look it up, but I thought it was more towards like 150, but maybe I'm
okay.
wrong.
I thought it was 130 or 150.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
just by spending $50 more, you can up your game significantly.
Yeah, I would say the Bratz Encore is a good starting point. You definitely want a burr grinder.
Yeah.
You don't want a one of the spinning blade grinders because you're not going to get any consistency.
Yep.
And then for burr grinders, out of the ones that I've tried that are electric, the Bratz Encore is pretty good. But if you're willing to go with manual grinders, there are some interesting options that will have a higher quality burr set and more consistency than a Bratz Encore, maybe in the $200 range. But you have to be willing to manually crank your coffee grinder every time you want to use it. And a lot of people think that won't be a problem, and then after having to do it for a week, are ready for an electric one.
Yeah, the last time I used a manual grinder, I remember cranking it at least 100 times for a serving. So I was exactly in that moment where it's like, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to do this. I know I'll get a better quality grind. This has good ratings. And I started doing it. And it's like, there's some mornings I don't want to just sit there and crank that handle over and over and over 100 and some times to get my coffee. So I get that. What was the one that you would recommend?
It's been a while since I was looking at manual hand grinders. One pretty good line is the Lido line, Lido, from Orphan Espresso.
Okay.
They have really nice burrs on those. But since then, there's been another one that's become really popular, and I don't remember the name. Let me see. James Hoffman has a video on it, I think. He has a video comparing several hand grinders.
Yeah. For me, like I have a Hario Skirtin, and I take that like on vacation. So it's not I think it has like the burr, but it's maybe not the best. I think it's like $50 or so. But yeah, I use that, to enjoy coffee, when I'm away from home.
Yeah, it's portable. Yeah. It's nice.
The popular one I was thinking of is the Commandante C40. That's become really popular.
How much is that?
That one I'm not sure. The Lido is around 200. It looks like 250 for the Commandante.
Okay. So really, I think the point in all this is that if you're roasting coffee and it's still, you're not satisfied, you think you're doing everything right, you might want to take a look at your brewing equipment. You might want to take a look at your grinder and your brew method to make sure that you're getting the best potential out of your cup of coffee. Okay. As far as tasting in general goes, do you guys have any thoughts or comments?
Well, because like you said earlier, sometimes, people, maybe their palate, isn't really quite developed. So, I guess maybe it's just trying to talk about, some practical, tips for how to develop your palate and how to, how to taste, these different kinds of notes that we're tasting. Like even, well, for me, like it's kind of helpful, even, tasting, with, someone else, for instance, like this morning when we were tasting and, and Michael was describing, all the different things he was tasting. And then I was like sipping it. I was like, oh yeah. He was like giving me a tour of the coffee, like as he was describing it and as I was sipping it. So it's like just, I don't know, tasting it with someone else, maybe just talking about it with someone else. And I think that can help, and even give you a vocabulary, even to know, what to look for.
Yeah, I was gonna say something very similar. Like the absolute gold mine, if you're trying to learn how to taste and enjoy something, we'll go with beverages, just beverages. If you can get a resource of someone who really knows what they're talking about that thing and tasting it and saying what they're experiencing, and you could, like a YouTube video or something, and you can watch it while you are also tasting that thing and thinking about it, that's like the best thing you can do. And in our time, there's lots of stuff like that out there. Yeah, it's a YouTube channel I like. His name's Ralphie, and he's over somewhere in the UK. But he just sits down with a camera pointing at him. He'll open a bottle of something, talk about it, tell you how it tastes, rant a little bit about the industry and, this thing, all in one video. And he has an exceptional palate. Sometimes he'll start naming tastes and it's just going on and on. He almost has to stop himself. But if you can get a hold of something like that for whatever you're trying to figure out how to enjoy, it's really the thing. Enjoying something with someone else
Yeah.
helps you learn how to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, for me, I think that's more than half of the fun, is just enjoying that experience, with other people, right? People you care about, people you want to spend time with. Okay, so that wraps up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. What are you using to brew your coffee? What kind of grinder are you using? Have you experienced some of these same problems that we experienced with our coffee brewing methods and our equipment that we're using? Share your experiences with us. Leave them in the comments. If you've got tips for other new home coffee roasters that you want to share related to the video topic here, leave those in the comments as well. And we appreciate you being here today, and we will see you next week in the lab.